that it may not be possible to develop a vaccine against COVID-19 and people may have to learn to live with it. The United Nations has urged countries to make mental health support a key part of their response to the pandemic, which it says is causing widespread psychological distress. Let's get the sports news now with Matthew Kenyon.
Yeah, good morning, Carney. The driver merry-go-round sparked by news that Sebastian Vettel is to leave Ferrari in Formula One is spinning. Looks as though Carlos Sainz is going to be the man to move into his vacated seat, whilst Daniel Ricciardo is set to shift from Renault to replace Sainz at McLaren. More moves to follow. Elsewhere, a very unpleasant experience for Tottenham and England star Dele Alli. He and his family were held at knife point in their home during a burglary. He says they're fine now. London police are investigating. No contact between players, venues needing deep cleaning and training equipment needing to be suitably cleaned and disinfected. Part of the guidelines issued by Britain's government for elite athletes wanting to get back to training as a step towards getting sport back on at some stage, but others are still deciding enough is enough. DR Congo is the latest country to declare the completion of their football league because of the pandemic, with Lubumbashi Giants TP Mazembe champions yet again.
Very interesting indeed. And nobody gets relegated to the DR Congo, apparently.
I don't know. There are a couple of relegations and promotions, but not in the East.
Interesting.
Where they haven't played enough games in that structure.
The legendary Matthew Kenyon with more sports in about 30 minutes. Business news now. Andrew Wood is in Hong Kong. In the United States, the world's most popular central banker, or powerful central banker, if I may, has sent shares falling after saying that the country faced a slow and painful economic recovery from the coronavirus. What's his solution, Andrew?
Well, this is Jerome Powell, who's the chair of the Federal Reserve, and he said that this recovery will be slow and painful unless there is additional help from the government. Now, you may remember that unemployment has, 3 or 4 months ago, unemployment was at the lowest levels in 50 years. And now it's the unemployment rate is 14.7%. And it's expected to rise before starting perhaps to go down later. Mr. Cowell said that there's a growing sense that the recovery will come more slowly, and it may mean that it's necessary for us to do more. Now, so far, the US government has approved nearly $3 trillion of fresh spending. The Democrats are talking about, they've proposed an additional $3 trillion. The Republicans said that there's no urgency to act on that. I think they think it's a bit too generous. Mr. Powell didn't actually say how much he thought was necessary. His comments, I mean, they disrupted the stock market. The Dow Jones Industrial Average went down by 2%. Relatively small, you could argue, compared to some of the massive swings we've seen, but in normal times that would be quite a big fall. And that's carried on here in Asia as well. For example, the Hang Seng Index here in Hong Kong is down by more than 1%.
And Andrew, President Trump says Mr. Powell is now an MIP. What does he mean by that?
It's a term from sport. It means most improved player. Mr. Powell was appointed by Mr. Trump, but Mr. Trump then complained an awful lot that before the coronavirus that the Federal Reserve wasn't doing enough to help the economy by cutting interest rates, which was breaking a big taboo in the United States. But now Mr. Trump seems to think that Mr. Powell is doing the right thing.
Andrew Wood joining us from Hong Kong. Thank you very much.
Now, South Africa's lockdown to curb the coronavirus pandemic has been in effect for over a month, and fault lines are starting to appear, with millions of jobs on the line in an economy that has almost ground to a halt. Worst-case projections say if the lockdown is maintained at current levels, the economy is set to contract by an unprecedented 16%. So, can South Africa's lockdown hold? The BBC's Vumani Mkhize has been finding out.
A month before the lockdown started, Bremer Logistics was facing exponential growth. CEO Tsepo Makoa had hired 16 employees, purchased 9 vehicles, and was about to move his business into a new 3,000 square meter warehouse. Business was looking good. But more than a month into lockdown, he's had to lay off 40 workers, and those that remain have taken a 50% pay cut. In an instant, the company is now battling to survive.
So we had to adapt and move from a growth to a survival mode. Survival mode entailed making sure that we stay in business. Said, okay, throw away the profit. it's no longer about the profit now. Right now, it's about saving this company. If we save this company, we can manage to save jobs.
Never before in the history of our democracy has our country been confronted with such a severe situation.
Saving lives, as opposed to saving the economy, was the difficult choice President Cyril Ramaphosa had to make when announcing the lockdown in March.
I struggled during this lockdown.
For example, laying off workers in such a tough and unpredictable economy has been difficult.
And this was a decision that was not easy to make. Having to sit down, having to tell people to go home, go into a world that is unknown. I found myself in a bit of a state of depression.
The lockdown initially enjoyed universal support, but as the economic toll begins to take effect, cracks are starting to show.
The real tragedy playing out here is no longer the coronavirus, but the lockdown itself.
John Steenhuisen, the leader of official opposition, the Democratic Alliance, has called on President Ramaphosa to reopen the economy.
This is a hard truth to speak, and it's an even harder truth to hear, but it's a truth that must be spoken. We have to end the lockdown crisis, and we have to end it now. There's very little for us to gain and almost everything to lose by keeping people at home and keeping businesses shut any longer.
I'm in Sandton, the economic hub of South Africa. The city hustle and bustle is long gone as companies have had to scale back their operations. Scaling back, however, has inevitably resulted in job losses. Prior to the lockdown, the jobless rate stood at 30%. But now, as some economists project, the jobless rate could rise to about 50% as the coronavirus continues to batter the economy.
The biggest labor union in the country, NUMSA, believes the continued job losses could lead to civil unrest.
You can already see signs of unrest on the ground. I mean, people are hungry.
NUMSA spokesperson Pagamile Subi says it is the poor who will suffer the most as a result of the lockdown.
The average worker supports between 5 and 6 unemployed dependents. So if those who are employed are not earning an income, what kind of ripple effect that has down the line? And you've already seen scenes of people breaking into shops, breaking into bottle stores, raiding them, and it is our view that this will actually continue to worsen if we don't start to take radical decisions that are going to ensure that our most poor have access to the most basic needs.
Community, the Department of Health is here.
As new cases of COVID-19 continue to rise in the country, health experts have warned against moving too fast to reopen the economy. But with queues for food parcels growing and job losses mounting, how long can South Africa's battered economy hold out?
The BBC's Vumani Mkize reporting.
There's been a spike in the number of COVID-19 infections in rural communities in America. According to data obtained by the TV network NBC from the White House's Pandemic Task Force, there's been an increase in infection rates in towns and rural communities in states such as Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, and Kansas. There are concerns about COVID-19 spread in these areas because those communities are less likely to be able to obtain access to health care services. Kirk Sowers is a cattle rancher in Kansas. When we spoke, he told me first about his daily life at the moment.
We're cattle ranchers here, and we have continued unabated. We've got fences to manage, we've got grass to manage, we have the care of the livestock, and which all that entails. Right now we're in the middle of breeding. We're doing artificial insemination at this time. We will be turning out bulls for the remainder of the breeding season here in about a week. So we just go from one season to the next, and in a few weeks we'll be in the hayfield making hay. So
yeah, sounds very interesting. And all this hasn't been disrupted despite the COVID-19 pandemic, has it?
You know, nothing has changed here at the ranch concerning our business here. No, the only thing I deal with is like if we go to town to pick up some supplies Some stores have been limited on their hours that they can be open. Now, my wife teaches school, and so she's obviously been at home and
teaching
doing
online?
That work from the house. Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
You seem to be not as worried as many other people I've spoken to. But what about your general community?
We're out here in Kansas, and we've got small pockets where we have high infection rates. Of course, wherever you find population concentrated, you're going to find more cases. And so we've got things like here in our county, we have a couple of prisons. We have federal prison at Fort Leavenworth, and we also have Lansing State Prison. We've had an outbreak in the prison there, which stands for most of the cases, or a majority of the cases in our county. We also have a few nursing home facilities, where the folks are more susceptible and immune compromised. You would expect to find that sort of thing there. Probably the thing that has affected our industry the most would be the processing facilities, for the meat processing.
Is that because they've been shut down?
I think I read today that we've had 7. A smaller plant closed today, which is basically a pork sausage plant about 100 miles west of us. They employed like 220 people or something like that, and they had 5 cases, so they've closed the plant down for cleaning and kind of reassessing their situation.
And President Trump, what do you think about all the pressure he's taking?
Oh, I wouldn't want to be him. Who would? I mean, that in that position at the federal level, you can't win. The politics is going to kill you either way. But I think he's probably handled it as good as anybody could have. As far as the upcoming election, I don't see anybody at the federal level that I would trust to do anything any differently or any better.
So it's going to be President Trump for you then?
I think that's the way it looks to me right now.
Kirk Sowers, a cattle rancher in Kansas, speaking to me not too long ago. Connie Sharp is working from home this morning. I'm Alan Kasuja in the Central London studio. The news continues here on the BBC. We are Newsday on Facebook, or just search for the BBC World Service, really, and also on Twitter. And remember, the news continues throughout on the BBC World Service.
This is the BBC World Service, bringing you a radio drama about the founding of Israel.
To be known as the State of Israel. Gentlemen, we have arrived in the promised land.
2 stories.
The kibbutz grows and grows behind its watchtowers. How can our village survive?
If we get what we want, there will be war. If we don't, there will be war.
One shared history.
There has been more hurt and harm in my lifetime than in generations before.
What was our crime? What did we do to deserve such a fate?
Miriam.
We have so much in common. We belong here like anyone else.
And Yusuf.
All I can see from here are your fences. All I can hear is your pipes pumping our wells dry.
Miriam and Yusuf.
We had nothing left to lose, nothing to maintain us, but hope.
Catch up on the series so far at bbcworldservice.com. On digital radio, television and your smart speaker, this is the BBC World Service. You can explore our upcoming programmes and delve into the archive online at bbcworldservice.com or on the BBC Sounds app. Listeners to BBC Radio 4 will be leaving us shortly after a summary of the world news, and you can rejoin us tomorrow morning from 1 o'clock. We wish you a safe and pleasant day ahead.
BBC News with Gareth Barlow. The World Health Organization is warning that Covid-19 may be something that people have to learn to live with. The WHO's emergency expert Michael Ryan told an online briefing that the new coronavirus strain may become another endemic virus present in our communities. The United Nations has urged countries to make mental health support a key part of their response to the coronavirus pandemic. It says there has been widespread psychological distress because of the disease. Thousands of businesses in New Zealand have reopened as the country relaxes restrictions put in place to contain the coronavirus. No new cases have been reported over the past 3 days, and the authorities say there is now a very low chance of community transmission. The United States has placed Cuba on a list of countries that are not fully cooperating in the fight against terrorism. It said the decision had been taken because of Cuba's refusal to extradite leaders of the Colombian rebel group, the ELN. A local prosecutor in the east of Burkina Faso says an inquiry has been opened after 12 people detained on suspicion of terrorism were found dead in their police cells. They were reported to be among 25 suspects from the ethnic Fula community. Burkina Faso security forces have been accused of killing Fula civilians in revenge after jihadist violence. Scientists say they've developed what they call a game-changing test for men that can detect prostate cancer. Doctors at Imperial College London say the non-invasive imaging technique is similar to MRI tests used to screen women for breast cancer. And the American online media firm BuzzFeed is to close its Australian and British news operations. The website said it had taken the decision for economic and strategic reasons. It's won widespread acclaim for its investigative journalism and for reaching young audiences. World News from the BBC.
Well, that's where we're going to leave the World Service and welcome you to another day here on BBC Radio 4. Good morning from me, Alan Smith, and everyone here at Broadcasting House in London. That includes Louise Lear, who will be here with the shipping bulletin in a minute. But first, who's this hanging on the telephone?
Hello. There are encouraging signs that the government may be easing restrictions soon.
Hello.
And, let's face it, we're all sick and tired of hearing about the coronavirus. Hello. So it's time to open up the debate. And, luckily, I, the award-winning Gary Bellamy, am back to do just that with a special edition of my award-winning phone-in programme, Down the Line. So give us a call and tell us how sick and tired you are of hearing about the coronavirus. Hello? That's the Down the Line lockdown special with me, Gary Bellamy, tonight at 11 here on BBC Radio 4.
And now here's Louise.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning. This is the shipping forecast issued by the Met Office on behalf of the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency at 05:05 on Thursday, the 14th of May, 2020. There are warnings of gales in Biscay, Trafalgar and Fitzroy. The general synopsis at midnight. High 150 miles west of Rockall, 1028. Expected 25 miles west of Shannon, 1030 by midnight tonight. Slow moving low Trafalgar, 1002, filling 1006 by same time. The area forecast for the next 24 hours. Viking, north at Sierra. Westerly or northwesterly 4 to 6, occasionally 7 at first in South Viking. Becoming variable 3 for a time in north, rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. South at Sierra, 40s, Cromarty. Westerly 4 to 6, occasionally 7 at first in north 40s, and south at Sierra, rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. Fourth Tyne, Dogger. West or northwest 3 to 5, occasionally variable 2. Showers, good. Fisher, north, German Bight. Westerly or northwesterly 4 to 6. Showers, good. South German Bight, Humber. Northerly or northwesterly 2 to 4. Occasionally 5 later in South German Bight. Showers, good. Thames, north or northeast 3 to 5. Showers, good. Dover, White, Portland, Plymouth. Northeasterly 5 to 7. Showers, good. Biscay, South Fitzroy. Northeasterly 5 to 7, increasing gale 8 at times. Showers, good, occasionally moderate. North Fitzroy, Seoul. Easterly or northeasterly 4 to 6, decreasing 3 later in west. Fair, good. Lundy, Fastnet. East or northeast 4 to 6, backing north 2 to 4. Fair, good. Irish Sea, variable 2 to 4, becoming north or northwest 3 to 5. Fair, good. Shannon, South Rockall. Easterly or northeasterly 3 to 5, becoming variable, mainly northwesterly 2 to 4. Fair, good. North Rockall, Malin. Westerly or northwesterly 3 to 5. Showers, good. Hebrides, Bailey, west or northwest 4 to 6. Rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. Fair Isle, westerly 4 to 6, occasionally cyclonic or variable 2 to 4 in north. Rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. Faroes, westerly or northwesterly 5 to 7, occasionally cyclonic or variable 3 to 5 in north. Rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. Southeast Iceland, variable 3 to 5 until later in north, otherwise westerly, becoming cyclonic later 5 to 7. Showers, wintry later, good, occasionally moderate or poor. Weather reports now from coastal stations for 0400. Tyree automatic, west by south 2, 24 miles. 1024, falling slowly. Stornoway, west 3, 15 miles. 1020, falling slowly. Lerwick, west northwest 4, recent rain, 27 miles. 1013, falling more slowly. Lucas, west 2, 19 miles. 1022, falling slowly. Bridlington, northwest 3, 1023, rising slowly. Sandetti light vessel automatic, northeast by north 6, 11 miles. 1020, rising slowly. Jersey, 16 miles. 1018, rising slowly. Channel light vessel automatic, northeast 7, 11 miles. 1021, rising slowly. Valencia, northeast by east 1, 27 miles. 1024, rising slowly. Ronalds Way, north 3, 27 miles. 1024, rising more slowly. Malin Head, southwest 2, 24 miles. 1025, now rising. And here is the weather forecast for the inshore waters of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, valid for the following 24 hours, issued by the Met Office at 0500 on Thursday the 14th of May 2020. The general situation. An area of high pressure over eastern North Atlantic will sink slowly southwards, bringing settled conditions to most areas. It will, however, be windy across the far north and far south. Cape Wrath to Rattray Head, including Orkney, westerly or northwesterly 4 to 6. Showers, good, occasionally moderate. Rattray Head to Berwick upon Tweed, west or northwest 3 to 5, occasionally 6 near Rattray Head. Showers, good. Berwick upon Tweed to Whitby, variable, mainly west or northwest 2 to 4. Showers, then fair, good. Whitby to Gibraltar Point, variable 2 to 4, becoming northwest 3 or 4. Showers, then fair, good. Gibraltar Point to North Foreland, northerly or northeasterly 3 or 4, occasionally 5 at first in south, becoming variable 3 or less in north. Showers, then fair, good. North Foreland to Selsey Bill, northeasterly 5 or 6, occasionally 7 in east, decreasing 3 or 4 later in west. Showers, mainly in east, good. Selsey Bill to Lyme Regis, east or northeast 4 to 6, backing north 3 or 4. Fair, good. Lyme Regis to Land's End, including the Isles of Scilly, east or northeast 4 to 6, becoming variable 3 for a time, except near the Isles of Scilly, then becoming north 3 or 4 later. Fair, good. Land's End to St David's Head, including the Bristol Channel, easterly backing northerly or northeasterly 4 to 6, becoming variable 3 for a time in north. Fair, good. St David's Head to Great Orme Head, including St George's Channel, variable 2 to 4, becoming north or northwest 3 to 5. Fair, good. Great Ormhead to the Mull of Galloway. Variable 3 or less, becoming north or northwest 3 to 5. Fair, good. Isle of Man. Variable 2 or 3, becoming northerly or northwesterly 3 to 5. Fair, good. Loch Foyle to Collingford Loch. Westerly or northwesterly 3 to 5, becoming variable 3 or less for a time in southeast. Showers, good. Mull of Galloway to the Mull of Kintyre, including the Firth of Clyde and North Channel. Northwesterly 3 to 5. Showers, good. Mull of Kintyre to Ardnagh Mercham Point. West or northwest 3 to 5. Showers, good, occasionally moderate. Ardnagh Mercham Point to Cape Wrath. Westerly or northwesterly 4 to 6. Showers, good, occasionally moderate. Shetland Isles. Westerly or northwesterly 4 to 6. Occasionally cyclonic or variable 2 to 4 in north. Rain or showers, good, occasionally moderate. And here's the general situation one more time. An area of high pressure over east and North Atlantic will sink slowly southwards, bringing settled conditions to most areas. It will, however, be windy across the far north and the far south. And that completes the look at the shipping forecast. I'll be back with a general look at the weather shortly.
Thanks, Louise. This is BBC Radio 4, where now it's time for Prayer for the Day with a Christian arts charity worker, Fiona Stewart.
Good morning. It has been interesting to observe how often we refer to Covid-19 as the enemy. The language of war, with its connotations of the Blitz and our spirited response as a nation, is a helpful one in provoking us to action. But it's simplistic to view the virus itself as the only enemy in this battle. I'm sure I'm not alone in experiencing a range of responses in the course of each day. Fear, anxiety, thankfulness, compassion, anger, grief, irritation and contentment have all been my experience over these past few weeks. Some of those emotions are legitimate, and to deny them is pointless. Grief is inevitable, anger justified, and compassion reassures us that we are human. Fear, though, is a real enemy, a smothering adversary who creeps in under cover of darkness and infects our thoughts and dreams. Nelson Mandela famously said, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." And Jesus reminds us that perfect love drives out fear. We are alert to the physical precautions that we need to take to guard ourselves and others against the virus, but we also need to come up with a strategy to build courage and bravery as individuals and as a nation. The ability to love one another in spite of difference, sacrificing our own comfort to see others flourish, is a sign of a courageous, emotionally healthy life. The sign that this virus and its ally, fear, will not triumph. Lord Jesus, we pray today for those who experience fear, and we ask you to drive out that fear with your perfect love. Amen.
That was Prayer for the Day with Fiona Stewart. We'll join the Today programme in 15 minutes here on Radio 4. But first, it's time for Farming Today with Charlotte Smith.
Good morning. Today, the Environment Secretary tells us it's time to get on with it.
I think it's important that whatever you're trying to do, in life and in policy, you should sort of begin it today.
More from George Eustace on the Agriculture Bill later. First, the Health and Safety Executive says it's had 82 concerns raised about social distancing in meat processing factories. Yesterday, the Unite Union told us it's worried about conditions for workers in some plants. Well, the HSE tells us that in about half the cases it's investigated, it found businesses had already taken appropriate measures. In 19 cases, businesses have been given advice about how they should make improvements, while 20 cases remain under investigation. It's a subject we will be coming back to. Now, all this week we're looking at imports, exports and the potential impacts of future trade deals. Each year, the UK fishing industry exports around 450,000 tonnes of fish, but the coronavirus restrictions have severely disrupted that. Well, Mary-Claire Carey-Jones reports on the impact it's all having, starting by speaking to Danny Curtis. He's a small-scale fisherman operating out of Littlehaven in Pembrokeshire.
It was, well, an instant cease of all income for us. The shop had to be closed, so we lost all the sales there. But also the export markets closed, and then immediately it was panic. I was quite upset because we'd had such an awful January through March. We had those 3 storms. It really couldn't have happened at a worse time.
So when did you manage to start fishing again?
Following the lockdown, I began bringing some pots ashore because I thought if I can't sell it, what's the point in leaving them out? But then we started doing a few home deliveries. We were amazed, to be honest, at the support we were having from the local people. And then I'd say after, well, the last 2 weeks, the export market has opened back up. So now I'm back full-time fishing. So I would say it's changed now from being primarily selling locally from the shop to now most of it is going to the exporters.
But not all of the export markets that you and your exporter work with have opened yet.
No, that's right. So the lady I deal with is only taking certain fish, because obviously the people in which she sells to on the continent, they haven't got the restaurants open in the likes of Spain and France. So whereas she'd normally take whatever I can catch, now it's only the select fish. We are limited to what we can land, but it's something. You know, I'm only a small fisherman, whereas the bigger boys who will employ 2 or 3 people and fish over 1,000 pots, because there's only limited demand from the continent, it will affect them incredibly.
And it's a similar story from David Wood, who's a shellfish merchant on Anglesey.
Around the middle of March, we thought it was all over. And then just at the beginning of April, there were sort of signs that people were going to take stuff. Started moving some live shrimps and live lobsters to France and Spain. It's going okay at the moment. It's somewhat limited, and the prices aren't so great. Initially, the prices were sort of 20-25% lower than usual, but they seem to be reaching a level again that's workable.
What impact do you think this will have overall on the fishing industry?
It's very hard to say. I mean, I think the problem will be when everybody's fishing, and we will see whether the supply is greater than the demand, and we just don't know. I was speaking to a Spanish customer yesterday, and he was saying that, you know, they're allowing restaurants to open in some places, but at 50% capacity.
David Wood. More on trade all week, and it's something which has come up in relation to the Agriculture Bill, which had its 3rd reading in the House of Commons yesterday. Now, this is a big deal. It's the biggest shake-up in food and farming since the 1940s. The bill sets out the transition from the EU's Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP, which pays farmers directly based on how much land they farm, to a new system in the UK, where farmers will be paid public money only for the public goods they provide. That's things like preventing flooding and improving the environment. The transition will start next year and be phased over 7 years. Agriculture policy is devolved, so the changes will be a bit different in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. This bill, though, is proving contentious, with concerns that the new system won't be ready by next year, that it doesn't protect farmers from cheaper imports produced to lower standards, and that it won't reflect the lessons learnt over the past few weeks. Well, I spoke to the Environment Secretary, George Eustace, just before he went into the House, and he told me there's no case for delaying the transition away from single farm payments.
We will not be changing the budget for agriculture during the course of this Parliament, so the amount of funding going in stays the same. The question is whether it makes sense to continue to pay payments just on an arbitrary area-based approach. And we don't think there is a case for that. I think it's important that whatever you're trying to do, in life and in policy, you should sort of begin it today.
This is a massive change, though, for food and farming. Now, on average, half a farm income is the subsidy that this bill starts to phase out. It's going to have a big hit on farm incomes, isn't it? Some of which will, of course, still be recovering from the effects of Covid-19.
Well, as I said, the total budget won't change next year. What will change is the way we spend that budget. And indeed, one of the things that we'll be considering is whether there should be approaches to help businesses get back on their feet in the aftermath of this coronavirus epidemic.
For instance?
Well, I think there's all sorts of things we can do by way of grants to support businesses to invest, to help support businesses in terms of market access. We're very conscious that farmers currently are very dependent on the single farm payment for their income. I think everybody agrees that that's not where they want to be in the long term. We will adjust this very gradually, and there will be a small reduction proposed of around 5% in year one for most farmers. But what we need to do is address the causes of poor profitability in farming, and that means using the powers in the bill to improve fairness in the supply chain so that farmers get a fairer price for the food that they produce. It means supporting farmers to invest in new equipment that can help them reduce their costs. And it means also supporting new entrants to get into the industry, for instance. And those are the types of policies that will get us to that end destination where we have a profitable farming industry.
Let's briefly talk about trade. As you're well aware, there's been a big push from farming groups, from environmental groups, to get a change in this bill to support the enshrining of standards of production. Why not just accept that?
Well, we've got a very clear manifesto commitment to protect our food standards and our...
So why not just enshrine it in law in this bill?
The reason for that is the way that these clauses are structured would actually cause some potential problems with some of the existing continuity trade agreements that we are seeking to bring across. So we want to have a new approach that in future trade agreements protects our standards, but it's not appropriate in our view to enshrine it in clauses in an agriculture bill.
This is making people nervous, though, isn't it? I spoke to the US Agriculture Secretary, Sonny Perdue, just before lockdown. Now, just to paraphrase, he really suggested that instead of keeping the current EU standards, British farmers should lobby so that they could change, some would say lower, standards, so that they could compete better on the world market. And some suspect that that is really the plan here.
Well, that's not the plan. Our plan is to maintain food standards and ensure that people seeking our access to our market do the same. I think,
but without it written down somewhere, how can you expect a business which has to abide by one set of rules to compete with imports from a business which doesn't have to reach those standards?
Well, it can be written down in the nature of any trade agreement that obviously is put together.
Just bringing together all the pressures we've talked about that will be on the farming industry over the next few years, how many farming businesses, how many farmers do you expect to leave? What are you preparing for in sort of industry churn?
Look, we're not saying that. I think the right thing for government to do is to set the correct policy framework. And then it'll be for individual businesses to decide their approach. And we've said before that we may indeed have schemes that enable older farmers, if they want to retire with dignity, potentially have exit payments through rolling up several years BPS in one go. That's something that we are exploring. And we also, crucially, want to have new ways of getting new businesses, new entrants coming into the sector.
Let's talk about the food system and how it works. Henry Dimbleby, who's currently looking at a national food strategy, says there are lessons to learn from the current crisis. We need to produce more food and export more food. We also perhaps should have a store to use in case of, for instance, a harvest failure abroad, which means we can't import. Is that something you are considering at the moment?
Food security has very much come up the agenda in the aftermath of this coronavirus crisis, because we've learned two things. Firstly, we've learned that we have an incredibly efficient and resilient food production and food supply chain in this country. We have world-beating food manufacturers. Farmers have increased production to deal with that panic buying episode. And we've learned that having that vibrant, profitable domestic farming industry is a critical component of your food security. But we've also learned as well that keeping markets open and keeping trade flows going has an important role to play.
Are you slightly frustrated that you've got the bill now and all of this is happening? Are there things you would have liked to have incorporated given the lessons we've now learned?
The bill is a very comprehensive framework bill that gives us the powers to do many different things, and For instance, this iteration of the bill requires the government every 5 years to publish a review of our food security.
What does food security mean then in those terms? In the future, what percentage of food would you like to see as homegrown?
It's less about having a target per se, although self-sufficiency is something that would be reported on through that review of food security, but it would look at issues such as impacts of climate change and availability of water, and the impact that is having in farming in more marginal areas of the world, and the impact that will have on supply chains. It will involve looking at the resilience and profitability of our domestic food producers, including farmers. It would look at our success in export markets, gaining access to other export markets, playing our part to contribute to global food security. And it would also look at financial vulnerability and food affordability at home as well.
So actually getting a higher percentage of the food we eat grown at home isn't particularly the target?
I think the view that I've always had is that if you support food production, whether it's glasshouse production in horticulture or more conventional agriculture, if you make it more profitable and you support new entrants into the industry and you help it invest to reduce its costs, then you will be producing more of the food that we eat in this country. The wrong thing to do, though, is to target that per se. The right thing to do is to target farm profitability, in my view, and then these things will take care of themselves.
The emphasis of this bill, though, isn't about food, is it? It's public money for public goods, and food isn't a public good.
Well, there is a lot in there in food, in that it seeks to get fairness in the supply chain. Conceptually, what we're saying is that farmers should be rewarded in the market fairly for the food that they produce. And we've got a number of measures to support profitable food production, both through improving transparency and fairness in contracts, but also in terms of helping farmers invest to reduce costs.
The DEFRA Secretary, George Eustace. More on the Agriculture Bill tomorrow. You can let us know your thoughts, of course, on all this. Email us. We're farming.today@bbc.co.uk, or you could tweet us. We're at BBC Farming Today. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer in Bristol is Heather Simons, and the studio manager, Jack Sweeney.
And as Charlotte said, there will be more from the farming team at the same time tomorrow at 5:45. We will join the Today programme in a couple of minutes, but first it's Tweet of the Day, and Chris Packham presents the plumbeous antbird in a Bolivian rainforest.
When army ants go on the march in the Bolivian rainforest, they attract a huge retinue of followers, often heard but rarely seen. And these include antbirds. The plumbeous antbird is one of nearly 240 species of antbird, all of which live in tropical South America, and all testament to the wealth of insect life in the forest there. Now you'd think that with a name like antbirds, their diet would be easily diagnosed, but surprisingly, antbirds very rarely eat ants. Instead, you see, most species shadow the columns of army ants, which often change nest sites or raid other ant colonies, and as the ants march across the forest floor, they flush insects and other invertebrates, and it's these which are quickly snapped up by the attendant antbirds. Most antbirds are supreme skulkers, hiding under curtains of dense foliage and only betraying themselves by their call and their song. And plumbeous antbirds have a particularly distinctive fruity trill.
And tomorrow's tweet is courtesy of the Bell Miner. And of course there are many tweets, hoots, chirps and squawks on BBC Sounds.
It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 14th of May. Good morning. This is Today with Nick Robinson and Justin Webb.
The headlines this morning: health officials in England have approved a new test to check whether people have been infected with coronavirus, calling it a very positive development. We'll examine how it could help bring the virus outbreak under control. Experts are warning it could be months before the NHS is able to fully restart services for millions of people on waiting lists. Also in today's programme, as care homes become the new front line in the battle against the virus, we'll hear from staff struggling to protect residents. When should the government give its blessing for churches to reopen? We'll be speaking to Cardinal Vincent Nichols, and John Prine's wife Fiona reflects on losing the folk legend to the virus.
I told him things I'd forgotten to tell him, things I had never told him. I told him that he was beloved by the world, that he had done wondrous things with his life. And in the end, I told him that my heart would be broken forever.
And the antiviral wipe star and self-confessed paranoid Charlie Brooker on how he's coping with the pandemic.
When the worst actually sort of unfolds, at least on some level, what you're worrying about is now clear.
We'll hear more about his new programme later in ours. The BBC News is read this morning by Alan Smith.
Public Health England has given the green light to a new test designed to check whether people have ever had the coronavirus, a move which it's described as very positive. The product looks for antibodies in the bloodstream to see whether a person may have immunity. It could prove a useful tool in easing the lockdown, as at the moment, tests can only check whether people are currently infected. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
A viable antibody test is seen by health officials as an important asset if lockdown restrictions are to be further eased. By detecting whether someone has had the virus and gained immunity, it makes it possible for that person to go back to work safely, especially if they're in health and social care. It's not yet clear the degree of immunity from coronavirus a patient might gain. Up till now, officials have said antibody tests on offer are not sufficiently reliable. But a test has been evaluated by Public Health England and is said to be highly specific and so a reliable marker of past infection. The device, made by the drug company Roche, already has approval from medical regulators in the EU and the United States. PHE is now in effect giving the green light for the government to adopt the test device if required.
Healthcare charities are warning that it could be many months before routine NHS services in England get back to normal. Waiting list figures are expected to show the number of patients waiting for treatment has risen sharply during the pandemic. Our health correspondent Lauren Moss reports.
To increase capacity within the NHS at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, many non-urgent procedures were postponed. The Health Foundation, the King's Fund and Nuffield Trust will tell the Health and Social Care Select Committee today that more clarity is needed on which services are now reopening and how. They warn that the bulk of care cannot be simply switched back to its pre-COVID state, and there will be a backlog of demand that will likely require some continued collaboration with the independent and voluntary sector.
The NHS Confederation, which represents many healthcare organisations, has said care homes have been neglected for too long during the outbreak. The government says its whole focus will be to guide residential homes through the weeks ahead. Here's Alison Holt.
As well as more clinical support for homes that look after older and disabled people, the government will detail how the £600 million it's announced for infection control will be spent. It says the fund will support measures to reduce staff moving between care homes, provide training and protect wages. More support will be welcomed, but for many care staff who have spent the last weeks struggling against Covid-19, seeing the people they support die from the virus, it will feel very late in the day.
Doctors say that up to 100 children in the UK have been treated for a potentially life-threatening inflammatory disease linked to coronavirus. Last month, NHS staff were told to look out for the rare condition after 8 children in London became seriously ill, and one of them, a 14-year-old boy, died. The symptoms include high fever, red eyes and rashes. Dr. Deepika Thakur, who's a paediatric cardiologist, has treated a number of children with the condition.
We support their blood pressure with medicines, we support their ventilation or breathing, and we're using different medicines that have been used to kind of modulate or suppress the immune system. So steroids, intravenous immune globulin have been tried successfully. For the most part, children, if they're picked up early and treated appropriately, they do respond well.
Businesses have reopened across New Zealand with the easing of its strict lockdown measures. No new cases of Covid-19 have been recorded for 3 days in a row. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, has garnered international praise for her response to the pandemic, with just 21 deaths in a population of approaching 5 million. The online media firm BuzzFeed is to close its UK news operation. The website said it had taken the decision for economic and strategic reasons. Tom Harrigan has more details.
Despite its small team and relatively recent entry into the market, BuzzFeed has become an influential player in UK news, winning widespread acclaim for its investigations, culminating in a Pulitzer Prize nomination in 2018 and reaching younger audiences than mainstream outlets. But the American company has struggled to make money from its journalism internationally. This year alone, it claims it will spend £8 million more on its news business than it will make from it. The website said in a statement that it would now focus on stories that hit big in the United States and end operations in the UK and Australia.
The Tottenham and England midfielder Dele Alli has suffered minor facial injuries after being held at knife point during a burglary at his home in North London. Police say jewellery and watches were stolen. There's a warning that live music is not likely to make a return until the end of this year at best. With the pandemic already hitting the music industry, thousands of songwriters have been applying to hardship funds through the PRS for Music, which collects royalties.
Thank you. 6 minutes past 6 is the time. Let us turn to the weather. It comes this morning from Louise Lear at the BBC Weather Centre. Morning, Louise.
Morning, Justin. Good morning, everybody. It's a cold start for the time of year. In fact, temperatures in Northern Ireland fallen to minus 5.1 degrees, and we haven't seen temperatures...